this week's edition of the Smoke-Filled Room. We're on the road this time. I'm in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. You guys get insight into the glamorous life that is mine as I record this from the Fairfield Inn and Suites, an absolute luxury in a one-room. You see the bed behind me. I'm trying to cover it so I look a little bit more professional. But we're here. We're talking about Illinois politics, and the good news is it seems like vacation schedule might be slowing down. We've got our full political team with us this week, which is awesome. So I'm going to introduce them in the order they're on my screen, but I've actually learned in watching these back that it's opposite. So when I point here, you guys see the person over here. So it gets really confusing with these screens being mirrored. But anyways, we got John Jasecki, we got Chris Jacobiak, Matt DeRay, Abby Oliver, Michael Butler, and whatever direction they happen to be, you can see them. They're waving at you. They got the names on screen. There's a lot going on in Illinois politics. So despite the fact that I'm not even in town, we're going to rock and roll here because we got a lot to get over. First thing we want to get into is a little bit of cleanup. We talked about last week and the week before the Illinois budget, the final of session. We had a discussion about legislative pay raises and how lawmakers had voted themselves a pay raise that was not constitutional. So this, in the past week, Pritzker has amended the budget using his veto pen to fix those pay raises. And so now instead of getting a 5.5% pay raise, those poor legislators, I don't know how they're going to afford to live, and they're only going to get a 5% pay raise. So instead of getting $89,675, they're going to get $89,250. So my question to you five is, how in the world do they survive? How do they pay their bills?
Oh, they must be really struggling right now. My heart goes out to them.
I mean, they get per diem on top of that. They get, committee chairmanship, extra stipends in dollars. So most of them are getting 15, 20K on top of that. And they still complain that they're not getting paid high enough. It's among the highest in the country last time I saw in terms of their pay, right? I mean, Chris, you seem to like, those types of details off the top of your head.
Well, what's interesting, Collin, is that for many legislators in the state of Illinois, even though this is technically a part-time job, if you look at the Illinois Blue Book, you see many of them have full-time legislator written. So for some of them, this is their only form of income, but that's the career politician mindset in Illinois government. But you're correct that Illinois has a more robust payments process for many of their elected officials, as we talked about last week in Dalton. So that certainly extends down to Springfield as well. So who knows how they're going to survive off that small chunk of change that is what their 5% pay increase.
Yeah, I mean, and they got a pay increase at the beginning of the year too, from what I understand. So I'd imagine these will be coming to a legislative campaign near you. I'm sure these will find their ways on the mail pieces for sure.
I mean, I saw one statistic that was going around that if cumulatively, like over the course of the past 6 months, they've increased their pay by like 26%. So it's a lot. I mean, it's almost $90,000 for what's supposed to be a part-time gig. Like if you look at neighboring states, they're getting paid 40 grand or 20 grand. In some cases, like we have some of the highest paid state representatives and state senators in the country. And I don't think we're getting, the most bang for our buck. I mean, obviously some of them are rock stars and do an outstanding job, but there's a lot of them that leave a lot to be desired. And one other point, these pay raises were exclusively brought to you by Democrats. Not a single Republican voted for this. But the Democrats, they make sure to take care of their own.
Well,
Michael brought up Michael brought up a great point, Collin. I mean, Indiana legislators only paid $28,000 a year, Iowa $25,000, and our neighbors to the south, Kentucky, they only pay their legislators $188 a calendar day. I mean, we've taken a part-time job in Illinois where we work 5 months a year and a couple weeks in the fall, and we've turned it into this almost $90,000 a year job. I mean, imagine like what we could fund possibly, smaller pet projects even in district to improve infrastructure if we just cut pay raises back even $20,000 and actually use that money for some good.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair point of where could this money be spent elsewhere? And I also look at the job being done. Most of the legislating happens in a few weeks. I mean, it's sit around, do very little, have some committee meetings, go out to the bars, hang with lobbyists, hang with your buddies. And then the final couple of weeks, hey, maybe we should pass some bills and get all the work done. So the question is, why do they need January through May? and a veto session in October, and then another week in November, when frankly, they do the vast majority of their legislating in just a few weeks. And I know the people down there will say, there's more that's done, and there is, but if you had a sort of shorter schedule, this legislature has proven that they get the job done in the final couple of days leading up to a deadline. So if you truncate that timetable, it just forces them to actually do their jobs maybe a little bit faster.
Well, to play devil's advocate here for a second, the argument in favor of higher pay for elected officials is that state representatives and state senators do work all year round in the form of constituent services. They have their shredding events.
They're supposed to be doing that.
No, they're supposed to be doing that, yes. But not all of them do. There are some who do that, and they probably deserve the 5% pay increase, but a lot of them just go down there, collect a check, and call it a day. Long gone are the days of constituent services in the state of Illinois for much of the state, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I wouldn't mind if it was a full-time job and they paid it like a full-time job. I mean, ultimately, if you don't pay legislators enough, you're going to end up with only the people who can afford to survive on no salary because they have enough money. And now you're excluding a big percentage of the population. So I understand the idea here of paying legislators a living wage, but this is a part-time job. So you got to pay them like a part-time job. If you want to make it a full-time job, then make it a full-time job. Mandate that they actually go back and do constituent services, that they do the job. Because you and I know it's their legislative aides who are doing all that work. Most of them aren't going back and doing the work from June to December. So if you want to pay them like full-time legislators, then make them work like full-time legislators.
Well, you know,
Well, maybe maybe you were right a couple weeks ago when you said that there is a lot of smart people down in Springfield, because somehow they made it to be the only job where you can continually fail and you get a raise instead of getting fired. So you're right about that.
That also happens in Illinois Republican politics. Keep losing and you're still going to get that next great gig to run a governor's race or a Senate race, or let's say a Supreme Court race, and then you lose that. So now you get an appellate court race. I mean, that's how Illinois Republican politics works too.
You know, and Collins said, you know, the ultimate irony of this pay raise situation is, you know, they call it a cost of living adjustment, or COLA, you know, when the General Assembly is continuing to pass legislation that, you know, makes it harder for Illinoisans to afford the cost of living through, you know, their property tax increases, through these unfunded mandates. You know, it's money for thee, but not taking care of the rest of the state.
Yeah, well, and that's a good segue into what is our next topic, because a lot of people don't realize that you've been saving 1% at the grocery store when you get your groceries, because Illinois, through the generosity of their hearts, since July 1st of last year, have suspended the 1% tax on groceries. That will be coming back on July 1st of this year. And so in just a couple of weeks, you're going to be paying another 1% on your groceries. And so the question is, down in Springfield, when they're talking about how they had all this money to throw around in their pet projects, what wasn't reported, by the way, Democrats all got substantial sums that they could spend on projects, infrastructure projects in their districts, but no Republicans got that. So if you're represented by a Democrat, you got extra money. If you were represented by a Republican, you got no money from those projects. And now we're talking about likely property tax increases, as we talked about in the last couple of weeks, because of the way that they took money away from the municipalities. And now when you get your groceries, you're going to pay that extra 1% in grocery tax. Why we need to tax groceries, I don't understand in the first place. But if you're a resident of the state of Illinois, get ready to start paying that extra 1% yet again. Thoughts on that?
Well, on top of that, the gas tax is going to go up on July 1st as well. So it's going to kind of be like a 2 punches to the gut for struggling families across the state.
Yeah.
Well, someone has moved here from Michigan. I didn't even realize that we had a tax on groceries, because in Michigan, that's just simply not the case. And so when we were coming up with topics for this, for this thing, Collin was telling me about it, and I was like, it just blows my mind that we're, you know, or like, I think gas is like $4.19 in DuPage County right now, and now we're going to add an extra thing on the top of that. It's just incredibly frustrating, and it just seems so just tone deaf from the legislature.
And it happens at a time when many of these commodities at the grocery store have actually been going down in price over the past several months as inflation starts to, for those goods, inflation is still affecting other goods certainly, but for groceries, it's gotten a little bit better at the grocery store than the absurd amount of money we were spending on eggs and chicken wings about a year ago. Now you're going to see an uptick in those prices again. So it'll be interesting to see if there's going to be any backlash for that. I remember talking to people back then who were just shaking their head and saying, I don't know how there's not riots in the street for how much people are paying for everyday groceries. That's certainly not the extreme case that we're going to be seeing with a 1% tax on groceries, but this is going to hurt working class families in this state because they're going to be going to the grocery store and paying a little bit extra for food they need.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
just
this
another
is like
classic
Springfield
example
for
of-
you because they raise the taxes and they temporarily decrease them, want you to thank them for doing it, and then, oh, by the way, this has a sunset on it and it goes right back up.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, in 2022, Dave Vella was running campaign ads talking about how he voted to suspend the grocery tax to make it
They
easier
all were.
for
Every
living
Democrat
for,
was.
for working families in the state to afford groceries. And what do you know? That tax is magically back after we get rid of campaign season. And I wouldn't be shocked if next spring some taxes magically go away for the fall of 2024 for Democrats to talk about.
Just
Yeah,
like
I mean,
the
that's the amazing thing is when Illinois Democrats run for office, they're basically Republicans. I mean, you watch any of their ads, they are essentially running Republican campaigns, and they go down to Springfield, they legislate like Democrats. It was in the playbook. Every single incumbent Democrat on the Senate side, on the House side, ran on, they said we lowered your grocery tax, which wasn't true. They suspended it temporarily. Among a list of things they said, we did all these things to lower costs for you and to make things better, but it was all just for campaign season, and it kicked right back in 2023.
We should take note as people who want to help Republicans win that there's a disconnect between what the voter actually experiences and feels and what the message is, that they can't connect the dots, that even though these politicians are saying one thing, they're actually doing another. So as Republicans, I'll speak for everyone except for Chris, we need to do a better job at messaging that and maybe take a note out of the Democrats playbook.
Yeah,
I
but
mean-
in order to do that, DeRay, you actually have to win some races to run on something. Unfortunately, with the Republicans and the super minority, what are they going to run on other than the Democrats are bad? Look at the bad things they have done, vote in the Republicans. That's what you're running on, basically.
Well, and maybe provide some solutions to those problems, like maybe take that one step further, not just complain into the universe.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we've got a situation where we talk to voters during the narrow window of campaign season, and yet research has proven that the campaigns are won and lost well before campaign season even starts. And so we should be talking to voters year round, putting mail pieces in front of them, text messages, advertisements, social media, getting them on email lists and saying, hey, listen, this is what your Democrat did. In a Democrat district, we should be the watchdogs, making sure voters know everything that's happening down in Springfield. That way, when the Democrats come home and try to say, hey, look, I did so many great things. I lowered your taxes. I did this. I did that. We've actually told the real story over the course of time. I mean, that takes time, effort, money, staff, things that we don't really have right now as a party. But that's how you win. That's how you beat these guys at their own game.
And if the Republicans were smart, they'd be at least able to, hyper target some of these things, pick 5 districts out of a hat that we might be able to be competitive, that they might be able to be competitive in 2024 and say, let's spend what little resources we have building something up for 2024. And then we can see how that goes. That's not what's happening right now. And it's going to probably negatively affect them come 2024.
Well, let's look at the next topic. We're talking about drama and doing things not so smartly. So that's a decent segue into what we're talking about next. I admit, I don't know what the heck is going on with this story. So I know some of you guys have been tracking this a little more closely. Apparently there has been some sort of a blow up at AM 560, radio show host, Mark Vargas. I don't know if you can call yourself that if you pay for your own segment, but whatever. Radio show host Mark Vargas has resigned in controversy and scandal and is enraged over something that was said in somebody's show. What's going on here? Oliver, I know you alerted me to this. Who has the details on what the heck is going on here?
Gosh. Wasn't it Chris who was telling us about it?
Or was it Chris? Who's got the
It was
details?
Chris, I
was
think,
me.
as much
It was
as I
me.
would like to claim
Chris, give me
credit
the
for that.
Okay, so my daily dose of entertainment is reading the Illinois Review, so you don't have to. And I was reading the recent article wherein Mark Vargas lays out why he had just left the Illinois Review. And apparently what had happened is there was the Black and White radio show, and there was somebody on it, I don't remember who, and they were talking about the debt ceiling and, everything. And then another AM 560 radio host, Sean Thompson, I believe, he calls in. John Anthony introduces him. This is Sean Thompson. He's on 4 to 7 every day, blah, 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 blah. And then Thompson just lays into this, whoever this guest was on the show. He called him a quote, taffy apple-headed moron. And there was the word moron thrown around a lot. And they were yelling at each other.
Right?
What was that?
On air, right?
On air. This is all on air. And they're yelling at each other. So about, he's like, is that directed at me? But it's all, people yelling at each other. So Vargas believed that this was the final straw for him at AM 560 for whatever reason. This was the straw that broke the camel's back for Vargas. So he's now out. He's resigned. He's not at AM 560 anymore. So if you want to listen to AM 560, you will not have Mark Vargas anymore. You're gonna have to stick to Dan Proft.
Yeah, I
I'll
mean,
start to listen to it maybe.
talk about your drama. I mean, I don't even know where to go with this. Who's got thoughts? I mean, it's so ridiculous. I'm not even sure where to go. I mean, really, all that I hear in this is I really need to up my insult game. Like, what was it? Taffy apple headed. I mean, I Googled it to make sure there wasn't some racist thing here. Google's never heard of this insult. So, like, I don't know where this came from, but I feel like I need to get better at insults because I'm not that impressive at all.
That's why Mark Vargas is arguing, right? That this was a racist insult, and that's why he, is cutting bait.
I mean, I guess you could say that's a racist thing because it's brown on the outside, but I don't think that doesn't seem like the context that he was using. Now, if you Google it and you use Urban Dictionary, there is a usage of taffy apple in a different context, and I don't recommend you look it up if you've got a sort of sensitive viewing palate.
You did that so you didn't have to.
yeah. So, but I don't know what the intention was here. Just to maybe make fun of the shape of his head. I don't know. I don't know.
Honestly, I think Vargas was probably just looking for an out at AM 560. Probably got sick of paying for the rent, or I don't. As he said, "Hey, this is a controversy I can take advantage of. I'm out. See, look at me. I'm taking the high road here. No more AM 560. I'm going back to Newsmax or whatever." I'm
he just maybe just saw it as an off ramp, but then I don't has Sean or John Anthony really said anything like that he was offended by it? I haven't seen that.
I haven't seen anything.
Typically, John Anthony's a fairly chill dude, so like I don't know that it's going to bother him as much as it might bother Mark, but who knows?
We think maybe it was orchestrated for some clickbait on Illinois Review. Maybe it's my tinfoil hat, but
perfectly could be.
Yeah.
What next, Oliver? UFOs?
Well, here's the thing.
Hey, you never know. It's Illinois, man.
This isn't a new type of story for the Illinois Review, and certainly not Mark Vargas. I mean, they do this. They have different subject matters each time, but they'll take something that's, okay, maybe it's bad. Sure, we'll go with that. We'll give them the benefit of the doubt. I shouldn't have said that, whatever. Is it worth leaving a radio station that you've been on for years at? Probably not. But does it get a lot of attention? Yes. Are we talking about it right now? Yes. So at the end of the day, I think they're getting exactly what they want because we're talking about it. People are sharing the article. It's the same thing. Dozens and hundreds of people show up to the Illinois Republican Party meeting. Okay, no one cares. You're just trying to make a story. I think that's what they're doing. And they're going the all press is good press route. The same thing that Trump did, just trying to get as many eyes on them as possible. Is it going to work? Maybe in the short term. I don't think in the long term. They just like to flash.
If that is the case, then you know
that's exactly what they're doing.
I'll give kudos where kudos are earned. I always say Republicans need to be more interesting. I mean, part of the reason we don't get a lot of press coverage is that we're boring as hell. So you know what? If that is what they're doing here, as much as it isn't my flavor of politics, I do have to give them kudos because you're right. It's worked. We're all talking about it.
Well, we talk all the time. We talk all the time, like between the moderates and the far right of the party. And I think
just to clarify, moderates and conservatives. Let's not say far right. Let's not use the left's terminology.
Fair enough. So I think there's two different, branches of the party, and they all are looking for reasons to maybe, like delegitimize the other one. And if we're going to really work together as a party, I think stuff like this just does not help because they're going to point to stuff like this. Look, like they're on radio shows doing all this, crazy stuff. So, I mean, that's what I see, but maybe it's just my perspective.
Most of our drama is conservative, unconservative drama, though. Like the moderate versus conservative battle is so hyped up. It happens so rarely. Usually it's just personal stuff. It's not about ideology. Yeah. It's just two people sniping at each other. And most of the time it happens to be one conservative attacking another conservative. And that's what we see yet again.
Yeah.
Butler, you keep unmuting. What do you want to say, man?
Oh, no, it's all right. I just had to cough and I didn't want to.
I called you out. Sorry about that.
All right.
All right. That's the drama at Illinois Review. I think this is an AM 560. I feel like this will be a recurring segment on this show, but maybe they can go a week without trying to make headlines for something ridiculous. Another person doing something ridiculous. DeRay, let's go up to Lake County, because the good and the bad here. The good is the Lake County Republican Party via the Republican Federation brought in Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy, which was a huge get, raised a bunch of money for the Republican Party. It was a packed room. It was a great event. So that was a very positive development. One of the negative developments is you open up the ad booklet at this dinner, and there is the former chairman, Mark Shaw, who has decided to start a competing organization with all of his former officers from when he was chair of the Lake County Republican Party. And it just happened to be on the page opposite the speaker's information. So it's what everybody sees right on the inside cover. But, there were no malicious intent with any of this. Matt, did I miss anything there? Did I get everything covered there?
You covered it. I mean, this organization's been around, the 10th Republican organization, and the original purpose was that it's supposed to help with the efforts of the state central committeemen of who's ever in the 10th. And they have each state central committee seat, they have the committeeman there and then a deputy. But then all of a sudden, this committee now all of a sudden has a treasurer and a chairwoman and a million different positions for who knows what. You look at their bank accounts, they have $0 as of yet, but they're advertising a bunch of things. Who even knows? It's probably just a shell organization. We'll find out soon, but they are this week's clown of the week. So we'll go with that.
I mean, ultimately you have, just to give context, you have the former chairman who, instead of aligning with the new chairman and working with the central committee and trying to further the party, has decided instead to take his old board and form this organization or restart it or whatever you want to say. You're not doing that to further the cause of the Republican Party. You're doing that as a splinter group. There's no other reason to do that.
And the messaging is completely just bonkers. I actually have a quote. I'll read it. This is how they think they're going to get people involved with the Republican Party. Is they said, Republican mouthpieces are urging you to run for the hills like tropical insect-laden seniors communities known as Florida, with deserts and sand and snakes. What? Like, I love Florida. I'm pretty sure everyone likes Florida. Why? How do you think that that's going to get people attracted to your
I
organization?
don't even know what's happening. I don't even know what's
Who
happening.
knows?
Who's telling people to move to Florida? I don't understand who it is they're saying. What mouthpieces are telling people to move to Florida? We're all telling them to fight. So who are they even referencing there?
I don't want to move to Florida.
I mean, listen, I'm way too white. Look at this skin. Like, there is no way I could survive in Florida. So I'm in the list of people who says don't go to Florida. But I don't understand who that they're referencing, who's saying that these mouthpieces are telling people to leave the state. I mean, you've got a new chairman who's putting in place more activity in Lake County than the county has seen in a decade, getting heralded around the whole state as the state party chairman. Different counties are copying what Lake County is doing, and the former chairman doesn't like that. So of course he's got to start sniping and attacking, and this is why Republicans lose.
Maybe they're looking after the Ken Griffin model of losing and then moving down to Florida, something like that, perhaps.
I mean, we've got people who lose and then move to Florida, or people who move to Florida and still run their radio show in Chicagoland from Florida, or you got those consultants who move to Tennessee and then still run Illinois politics, but from Tennessee. I mean, there is a model here, but I don't think that's what they're referencing.
So you're telling me, Collin, I can move to Arizona and still do my job?
I mean, unfortunately, anyone but you, maybe, but you would just spend the whole time on the golf course. We wouldn't be able to reach you.
I respond to email from the golf course. Don't worry. This will be a very productive 4 hours of time.
Yeah, so in between duffing and trying to get out of sand traps, you can answer a few texts.
Yeah.
Butler found that humorous. I like it. All right, let's let you guys indulge for a minute on presidential politics. I usually make you wait till the end, but I know you're excited to talk about the latest developments. Seems like we've got a lot of candidates who've gotten in, some serious, most not serious. So who has thoughts on what's going on with the presidential race? And DeRay, why is Vivek going to win this thing?
Whoa, let's not let him go on that rant yet. So I'll give you the update on who got into the race this week.
Oh, yes.
So, this week you saw 3 entries into the presidential race. You saw former Vice President Mike Pence launch his campaign on Wednesday. Chris Christie, the former governor of New Jersey, launched his campaign to just go after Trump for the next couple months on Tuesday at a town hall in New Hampshire. And then the former governor, or the current governor of North Dakota, Doug Burgum, launched his campaign.
What's the difference?
Who?
Former, current, nobody knows who he is.
What makes him interesting as a candidate is the fact that he's a billionaire. He's the second wealthiest governor in the country, you know, right behind our wonderful governor, JB Pritzker. That was sarcasm for viewers who didn't grab that one. But you know, he's a billionaire, so he has the ability to self-fund his campaign for a while. I'm going to invest a lot of money into, you know, digital advertising to reach that $40,000 donor threshold to make the debates. So, you know, I think the most serious candidate who got into the race is Mike Pence, who's been polling, you know, right around third place, but still in the single digits. But Burgum could be one to watch with the amount of money he has, and if he's willing to put a lot of it into it, you know, he could, you know, maybe find a lane in this.
Yeah, and take half of DeSantis's vote with them. Still great. I'm hearing more and more good news on the coalition to re-elect President Donald J. Trump again, guys.
I just don't
More
even hear
people coming in.
I just don't even hear your words anymore.
Well,
I mean, I'm looking at this this thing we posted. We've got what, 10 candidates now in this race. Like it's growing, and there's more talking about it, right?
Yeah, and the more to talk about it, half of them will jump in. Even a third of them jump in. Come on, if you're in Mar-a-Lago right now, you're partying all night long. This is going to be the easiest primary ever if even half of these people stay in the race.
I mean, we see this all the time. Before the first debate, before the first primary, anybody can run for president. So let's see who makes it on the debate stage. Let's see who makes it into that first primary before we start saying it's going to be a big field.
That's true. I think it was, well, obviously, like Chris Christie, I mean, he's kind of on like a kamikaze mission, just like against Trump, just like beat him up as much as possible. I think that obviously Vice President Pence, like there's potentially a path there for him. I saw an ad that they put out right out of the gate, kind of like attacking Trump over January 6th and how that was handled, and you know, contrasting how Trump handled that situation versus how Pence did. So that was pretty interesting. And then this guy from North Dakota, who knows? I just feel like it looks like, I feel like it's almost like an episode of like West Wing, and like this is like one of the candidates running for president. I mean, it just fits that mold, you know? It's like, is this 1992? I get maybe.
I mean, the video, the good news is that video coming out, anytime I have trouble sleeping, I just put on that Burnham announcement video. I mean, that thing will clearly put you to sleep pretty fast.
I don't know. I watched DeSantis, I watched DeSantis's campaign announcement too. That's even better than melatonin, man. Gotta admit. But you're right. He's like an AI generated presidential candidate, which haven't surprised me in the era of ChatGPT and the AI. Thank you, Elon Musk.
There you go.
All right, now that you kids are done talking about the inferior candidates who have no chance of winning, we could talk about this man right here, Vivek Ramaswamy. He's going to be the next president. He's going to be the greatest president we've ever had, probably in the history of presidents, the greatest.
Matt,
if he can go on this rant, can I go on RFK?
Do what?
He promised me a cabinet position. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh.
But seriously, I think that the route that Chris Christie is taking is actually not the dumbest, because his brand is to be kind of like a fighter. Obviously not a fighter like Trump, but every other candidate is not being as aggressive against Trump. And we know that Trump is going to fight back. And I think a lot of people are excited to see those two in the ring, and especially those people who are more looking for the not a politician, looking for the people who say it like it is types. I think that they'll actually gravitate towards Christie more than the other candidates. So I'm excited to see how this will play out, and maybe he'll get one of our votes.
I mean, listen, Christie was the guy who started that whole brand. Trump perfected it, but Christie was the first guy to become sort of YouTube famous for that direct, more gruff persona. I like Chris Christie a lot. He missed his window by pansing out, not running against Obama. Had he run then when he was at the apex of his popularity, I think he would have had a decent chance, but he waited too long. He missed his window, and he's just sort of been an also-ran ever since. And there's one very easy way to deal with this. The only time it's going to matter that Chris Christie is in this race is during the debates. And guess what? If you're Trump, why the hell would you get on that debate stage? There is no reason for Donald Trump to actually debate this field. So if he doesn't even get on the stage, then Chris Christie is wasting all of his time.
The interesting thing, like, we don't really have time to talk about it now, but if people want to like Google it later, like there's like a very interesting like timeline when it comes to like Chris Christie and Jared Kushner and Jared Kushner's dad. There's like a whole, like, you could write a book about it. It's pretty insane.
There are very direct ties from Chris Christie to Rudy Giuliani to Trump and Kushner and the whole crew. I mean, they have always been very connected, which is why Christie opposing them is actually kind of a big deal. I mean, you've got Christie, you've got his VP in Pence. There's a lot of people who are coming out opposing Trump who were very, at least at some time, had very close Trump ties. That does tell you something.
Look, I think you made a really good point about, kind of this field. You said, Christie missed his window. And I think that's why you're seeing some of these people, like Pence and DeSantis get into this race. I mean, by 2028, Pence hasn't been VP for 8 years. DeSantis hasn't been governor for 2 years. For candidates like those two, this is their window. And if they want to take advantage of it, you got to get in and run against Trump.
Yeah, I mean, timing is everything in politics. I've seen so many candidates who miss their window, either go too soon or too late. There's a lot you can control, but most of politics you can't control. It's out of all of our hands, which is hard for many of us to admit because we're controlling and we like to think that, we have so much impact on this process when we really don't. You just have to be ready to strike when the moment is hot. And for a lot of these candidates, this may be their moment. DeSantis, is he going to really be popular in 4 years from now? It's hard to say. Probably not. People have short attention spans. If he didn't run, I don't know that he'd be in the news for 4 more years. Some of these candidates, it's just, hey, I mean, is Pence going to be relevant 2, 4, 6 years from now? No, he's not. So in many of these cases, it's now or never. So why not? I mean, if Bill Clinton proved us anything, it's that anything can happen in politics. So why not at least put your name on the ballot and see what happens?
And I think that this field would be very interesting. I mean, you've got the former vice president, you've got probably the most popular Republican governor in the country in Ron DeSantis. You have other governors and other elected officials in this race, but none of that matters, unfortunately, because you're still trying to go against the former president of the United States, Donald Trump. I would love to see this race come out to fruition, but all of these people have such a monumental mountain to climb over the former president. That's the issue here for all of them.
Well, we'll see. That's as much presidential race talk as I can stomach. So we will come back. I'm sure we'll hit this every week. Oliver, you know what? You haven't had a chance. Go ahead. Why don't you close us down on this topic?
Oh, I can fight with Chris anytime, so we can always can it.
We all like watching you fight with Chris, so go ahead.
Oh, we're about to talk about the Chicago Bears, so I think we're pretty much
plenty of fighting there. All right, we haven't had a chance to have an update on the Chicago Bears for a few weeks, and I've wanted to talk about this topic. There's a few things to talk about. So first of all, I said it last week, demolition has begun on the property and is very, very sad. It's mostly just interior demolition. So you just see the equipment, you don't see much of it, but that building's coming down and it's going to come down soon, which for those of us who live in the area is a sad moment. Very sad indeed, but I know most of you don't really care. So I'll move on from that. The big things to talk about are two things. Number one, what's been in the news a lot has been, are the Bears actually going to move their stadium out to this property in Arlington Park? For a long time, it was assumed that was going to happen. And I kept telling people, guys, there's many steps left here. Don't just assume that this is going to happen simply because the Bears closed on the property. And here we are with one of the major milestones, one of the major challenges being the tax impact of that property. And so as a result, the Bears have had to start looking for leverage. So they went to Naperville to get some leverage. They went back to Chicago to get some leverage. And so there are developments here where the Bears are now having conversations with other communities. There's an argument to be made that they should have done that from the beginning. They shouldn't have done it the way they've done it. It's kind of a little bit ham-handed how they've done this, but they had a new president coming in. Maybe the timing was just not in their favor. Who knows? But ultimately, now it's no longer just assumed that they're going to move to Arlington Heights. Abby's area of Naperville is putting in for it. Somebody started a rumor that Rockford wanted it, though no one in Rockford seemed to be able to actually agree that that is something that's in process. I know there's a bear up in Gurney Mills in Matt DeRay's area. So, maybe Gurney's going to start putting in for it. But you got the black bear that's up there getting news. So maybe that's just step one. Now move the Bears up there. So everyone wants to get in on this conversation. So let's stop there. We'll talk about the tax stuff next, but let's stop there. I mean, where are the Bears going to be playing in 10 years?
So this whole thing, so with Naperville, I think it caused a really interesting discussion locally, as on top of just all the stuff where the Bears even going to go. So when so Scott Worley, newly elected mayor of Naperville, actually reached out to the Bears, and this information became public. There are a lot of Democrats in the
accidentally became public.
Yes, accidentally on purpose. Yes. And a lot of Democrats were like, well, we don't have a strong mayor system. So how dare you even try to, develop the economy in our community? And it's caused a, the Republicans have to respond, and Naperville being Naperville, they can't resist giving their 2 cents on something. So
Listen, I don't think it's a bad play by Worley. Why not throw the flyer out there, get the conversation going, get some press, get some interest. I mean, it's a long shot at best, but I don't think this is a mistake by Worley.
It makes him look really active and trying to be proactive in his community very shortly after being elected. But I think a tweet I saw about this whole thing it really encapsulates this whole situation. And it said, this is giving kids from Naperville another excuse to say they're from Chicago, and that's really the last thing we all need. So that yeah, gotta love my Naperville folks, but they're a different breed for sure.
Naper Thrill is not Chicago. People tend to struggle with that.
So my concern here is if Naperville is on the table, having been to Naperville and have ran campaigns in Naperville, where the heck are they going to put it? Like, where would they put it? Like Arlington Heights, you got the land, you already own it, everything. They're developing Naperville like crazy in the form of $600,000 homes for the upper middle class to move into. Where are they going to put the new Bears Stadium in Naperville? I don't see. I mean, Oliver, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but is there a choice plot of land that you could put an entire new Bears Stadium on?
So I would say there's a little bit more space to expand on the southern part of Naperville. There's also a northern part of Naperville that it's right along 88, and it's kind of some undeveloped areas, some factory areas that could be remodeled into a stadium type area. So it would be a tight squeeze, but I think they have the capacity to do it. So.
Well, I'd like to see the tax proposal that Worley put in front of them, because I'm sure it's that I could assume that would be quite lucrative in comparison to whatever the Arlington Heights people are giving them. But I'm sure Collin probably knows the specifics more on that than anybody else here.
Well, I'm curious, John, is the Rockford stuff real, or is that just Marty Moylan being Marty Moylan?
Yes, if you look at the CapFacts article about that, a Rockford area legislator said there's been no discussions, but if stuff falls through, they'd be more than happy to. In terms of like feasibility, Rockford's just probably like too far out. From my house to downtown, it's an hour and 15-minute drive. There probably have to be substantial infrastructure developments in terms of getting a train out to Rockford, expansion on I-90. So I just see that as that is a bottom of the list of possibilities. But my other thoughts on this are, it's kind of smart on the Bears to do this. I mean, you had Arlington Heights, you had a great property with the raceway, and you've kind of gone through some first steps of seeing what a potential tax deal could look like. The Bears don't like what they're seeing right now, and they're probably just using Naperville as a negotiating tool to get a better deal with Arlington Heights. It's smart on their end. At the end of the day, I think they're going to be building in Arlington Heights, because what are they going to do with this property now that they've bought? They're working on demolition now. Like, who's going to want to buy a racetrack?
That's what people are missing. So this is a hugely valuable piece of land that, because it came up and the sale came up so fast, you didn't have as many developers. I know developers in the area who wanted to put in for it, but just didn't have enough time to put together a package that would have been attractive enough to Churchill Downs. And so this is an incredibly valuable piece of land that the Bears could flip and make a pretty tidy profit on it, or they could develop the damn thing. I mean, ultimately, when you look at a lot of NFL franchises, they make plenty of revenue from outside of game day. I saw a study done that the Bears were last in the league a few years ago on the revenue they bring in from outside game day. And part of that is the horrible site that they're on. Part of it is just their lack of diversification. When you've got a plot of land that you can build, they could even build an entertainment complex on it that isn't a stadium, or maybe the Bears practice out of there instead of Lake Forest, and poor DeRay will lose another Lake County tie to Lake County. But you could put a facility there, you could put a field there with shops and condos, and you could make a ton of money if you build that property up. Doesn't have to be a stadium. And so I think a lot of people have missed that. I've been saying this since they bought the land, that this is profit for the Chicago Bears franchise, and they desperately need that profit. Is it a stadium? Maybe, maybe not. I think they build something on it, but in worst case scenario, they could simply flip it. But ultimately, I don't know. I still think it's at most 50-50 that they move the stadium to that land. I think they do something with it. But this has created a lot of leverage. This whole situation over the last year has created a lot of leverage with the city of Chicago. And now you see that there are conversations between the new mayor, Brandon Johnson, and the Bears ownership and leadership to talk about, hey, is there any way we can salvage this thing? The previous mayors have not been too kind to the Chicago Bears, Lightfoot being among the worst in terms of the treatment of the Chicago Bears and not taking them seriously. If the new mayor takes them seriously and finds some way to provide them a much better experience on game day and outside of game day, I mean, when you want to buy Bears paraphernalia, there's no big shop even there on that complex. Like if you want to get Bears t-shirts and jerseys from a Bears licensed vendor, you got to go to an L stop because that's the only place they could find to shove little shops. I mean, they're just the Bears are just squeezed way too tightly. And if the worst thing that comes out of all this for them is they work out some better deal in Chicago and they start making a lot of money off this Arlington Park property, they're coming out pretty well ahead.
Yeah, but Collin, I think, like why like the benefit of building at Arlington Heights is too, like you said, you can build a stadium and that entertainment district out of it. So you can build that dome stadium, you can make a bigger capacity than Soldier Field. I mean, Soldier Field is one of the smallest stadiums in the NFL, and you're seeing some of these teams like out in Glendale where the Arizona Cardinals play. They have their stadium and a huge entertainment district, year round with casinos, Topgolf, and all these other things. And I think the benefit of the Bears moving out to the suburbs is you can build a world-class stadium, to bring Super Bowls, Final Fours, and all of these things to the Chicago media market that are never going to come here now. And then on top of it, you can build this beautiful entertainment district that some of these first, proposals have kind of been looking to do.
Yeah. First of all, I think we all just have to wonder, is John on the Phoenix or the Arizona Visitors Bureau board? Because I think if anyone's trying to get people to move to somewhere, it's John pushing people to Arizona. But yeah, listen, there are a lot of reasons to want to build this stadium in Arlington Heights. There's a lot of good to be had. But you know what? There's a big barrier right now, and that is politics. That's the school boards, the elected officials. I mean, these are all people who say, look, you've got lots of money. We want some. I mean, this is Chicago. Everyone always has their hands out in Chicago. And so if they're going to ask for too much, the Bears can just say, fine, screw it. We don't need to do that. I mean, I see no matter what, the Bears are going to come out ahead. They could stay in Chicago and come out ahead. They can go to Arlington Heights and come out ahead. So they do have a lot more leverage in this situation than people realized. They just weren't utilizing it prior to a couple of weeks ago. They just kind of let things happen. And then you got a bunch of school districts who saw dollar signs and said, ooh, cool, we can go get some money. And so finally the Bears realized, ooh, gee, we should have been actually playing our leverage all along. So this was mishandled, I believe, from the beginning where they weren't utilizing all of their leverage. Now they're finally starting to play the game a bit. And yes, all of us think going to Arlington Heights would be a big boon for the region. I live right down the street from it. I mean, my property values would go through the roof. So trust me, I'd love it to happen. But it's not going to happen if these legislators all want their cut of the pie, if Chicago wants their cut, if these local school districts keep to these ridiculous demands of what they want out of it, then you know what? The Bears are going to say, we're going to be making less money, not more. Fine, we'll just stay in Chicago. Let's talk about that other half of the equation because it's just ridiculous. I don't think people realize how ridiculous this is. Let's talk about the tax impact of that property. So the value of the property prior to now, under just Arlington Park was X, and I don't remember exactly what X was. It was somewhere in the 30 million, 27 million range. One of you could maybe Google it while I'm talking and give me exact specifics, but somewhere in that range. When Arlington Park was operating, the uber liberal far left assessor in Cook County came in and valued the property at almost 10 times what it had been valued previously at 197 million. To understand how ridiculous that was, when Arlington Park was operating, it was valued at this. Kagi came in and said, Arlington Park is not operating. It's sitting there just depreciating in value, falling apart. The assets, many of the assets have been sold off. And now I'm going to value it at almost 200 million. Crazy. So then the Bears said, well, rightfully so, what are you doing? It's nowhere near worth what it was even before, let alone worth almost 10 times more. And so they went in to try to cut a deal to say, this is ridiculous. We need to lower this value. The school districts all saw dollar signs. Now, keep in mind, this is just for the 2022 tax year. This isn't the long-term deal of what happens with this property. This is just for right now, what's happening for their taxes right at this moment. Nothing's being done on the property. There were no kids going to school from this property before. There are some residential areas, but there's no changes to it with the Bears taking over. Those residential areas stay. So it's not like then the Bears taking over is going to increase the number of kids who go to schools in those districts. And yet the school district said, ooh, we can get millions and millions of free dollars. We want it. The Bears came in and said, we want to negotiate this. They offered what they thought was fairly reasonable. They said that the taxes before on the park were $2.8 million. We're going to accept a valuation of 52.5, which would mean we'll pay $4.3 million. That's $1.5 million more than what was being paid when there was actually racing and things and events and things happening on the grounds. They said, fine, we'll swallow this pill. We'll pay you $1.5 million more. All the school districts wanted what I think was almost double that. And so they said, fine, we're just not going to negotiate. Screw you. I mean, this is all ridiculous. People just seeing giant, oh, give us our money, when the school districts, if there is development on the property and more kids going to the schools, there absolutely should be more money going to the schools with those kids. So down the road, it is absolutely reasonable that these districts should get some more money from this development. But right now, it's just them coming and backing up to the trough saying, we want money. And the Bears are saying, this is absolutely ridiculous.
Well, and Collin, so the nice thing is for the Bears is they don't have to pay the 2022 property taxes. Actually, Churchill Downs is still going to be paying those. So like you were talking about, the property was assessed a $16.2 million tax bill for 2022. And Churchill Downs was negotiated their way down to paying $7.8 million still, for this property that isn't even being used. It's just insane how, the Bears purchasing this property loan is, basically projecting what the value of the property is going to be for the future.
Yeah, we've got, Ed Sullivan, a good friend of ours who's done a few videos with us about this, has basically said some of the things that they've been doing is it's on the borderline of being illegal. You cannot project out the value of a property. The way that they've been handling this has been at the minimum sleazy and a bit underhanded. And I think the Bears have been right to say, guys, this is nonsense.
Yeah, and it has to be a projection of future value. Like, there's no way you go from a $33 million assessment in 2022, to $33 million assessment in 2021, to $197 million assessment in 2022, unless you're projecting future value. Like, you've either been undervaluing the property for the entire time, or like you said, you're doing something borderline illegal on projecting its future value.
Because their excuse was, they said it was about, this was the sale price. And so they're doing it. But what property values like that on a sale price of the property? Like, there's no other property. Like, if they did that to our headquarters, which is in Cook County, so I'm sure after calling Kagi fair left, we can expect a really good valuation on our property. But ultimately, you don't value it at the sale price like that. It's just not done. It's never been done. And yet here's Kagi coming in. He sees his chance for dollar signs for the county, for the governments, for the school districts. He sees good press for him. He can go take it to those big bad billionaire Bears. It's just all bullshit politics.
Well, that's what Kagi's MO's been since he got into the assessor's office, has always been moving the burden from one class of people to the business community. Now, business community to Kagi, that all sounds good because you think he's going to be, the businesses downtown and all those wealthy billionaires. No, it's all businesses. No matter what size business you own, Kagi's upvaluing your property and you're paying more property taxes. Now, I understand taking some of the weight off homeowners in Cook County, certainly, but that's Kagi's mentality. And it's going to the extreme here with the Chicago Bears example.
I'm trying to, make sure I don't get too angry here. We had a very nice and sweet woman who sent in a note saying that more people would watch if I didn't swear so much. So I'm trying to be good, I promise. But this just makes me so angry because this is what happens in Illinois. The basic, easy, obvious stuff is never easy. It's never done with common sense. And I don't think anyone cares about Republican or Democrat. They just want common sense from their government. And this is just not common sense. Anyways, all right. Let's move on. Let's talk about the next topic here. I know Chris always loves to talk about corruption and trials, and we have James Weiss on trial right now. So, of course, we've got to talk about it. There's a tie to Lake County because as this is being released on Friday, it would be a day or two prior. Former State Senator Terry Link from Lake County is one of the government's witnesses. So there are ties to Matt there as well. So, Chris, kick us off. Matt, I'd love to hear your thoughts on Terry Link once Chris gives us an idea of what the heck this is all going on.
So James Weiss is former Cook County Assessor Joe Barrios' son-in-law, and he got tied in with the sweepstakes lobby, like the sweepstakes machine, which are technically gambling machines, but technically not gambling machines under state law because of a loophole. Anyway, he gets involved with these people, and now he's on trial for bribing state officials. So the three main people on the stand this week testifying for the government our former state senator, Terry Link from Lake County, who was approached by former state rep Luis Arroyo with a bribe, but little did Arroyo know, Mr. Link was wearing a wire for the government. So he had turned state's evidence already, federal evidence already, and was ratting to the feds at that point. In addition, making his second appearance in a high-profile federal trial in as many months, we have Robbie the Rat Rita, who is once again testifying on behalf of the government as to this effects on gambling legislation in the state of Illinois. Bob Rita has for a long time been the face of all gambling legislation in the state of Illinois. I'll never forget when they passed the Chicago casino bill. Who was in the Chicago City Council that day? None other than Bob Rita, making sure the gambling legislation went through. So he testified earlier this week as to Weiss and everything going on with the sweepstakes machine down in Springfield, and making his federal trial debut was former state senator Tony Munoz, who is now a lobbyist for the gambling community. And he was also talking about a number of these things. So what does this mean? It means that everybody in Springfield is basically talking to the government, and James Weiss is going to have a very difficult time here. If the ComEd 4 trial is any indication, it seems like anybody on the wrong side of the government's going to have a hard time nowadays. All three testified that they had not been directly bribed by Weiss or Arroyo, but we'll see how that pans out later in the trial, because there's still many
next week the bombshells are coming, so we'll see.
Yeah. This is kind of the start where they kind of lay out all of the groundwork for all of the trial and everything. So of all the legislation, that's mostly what they're talking about there.
Yeah. But there's a tie with Lake County, because for a long time, Terry Link was the power player in Lake County, and he really did begin the turnaround of Lake County going from red to blue. Melinda Bush and a few others, I think, were the ones who ultimately made it happen, but it started under Terry Link. And during that time, Link, as the head of the Lake County Democrats, kept claiming that he didn't have any legal problems, that he didn't snitch to the government. I mean, he lied to the press and to the public for basically 2 years, was never really called out for it. And here he is testifying under oath, admitting that all the things he said for 2 years was a lie. But of course, he was never called for it. He's not even being called out for it now. That the guy was under legal issues, had some serious problems. I mean, he testified under oath that he used campaign dollars to gamble. He gave campaign money to friends of his. I mean, these are serious offenses that would be front page news if the Lake County Republican head did it. But of course, the Lake County Democratic head do it. And where is it in the press, Matt? Where is it?
Nowhere. Well, it's there, but it's only if you read between the lines, and even then it's not front page. But you know what happens when you rat on your friends. We've all seen the mafia movies, but I don't think that's going to happen to Terry Link. But it just goes to show you, it's Democrats showing their true colors, even if it's years down the line. And he kept getting reelected, and eventually he resigned from being the chairman of the Democrat Party and of being the state senator. But once again, voters don't care. And it goes back to, how can we convince them, hey, look what your people are doing. Look, they're evil. They're gambling with campaign funds. They're ratting on their friends. They're lying under oath.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't go so far as to say evil, but certainly corrupt. I could agree with corrupt.
But
I'd say being corrupt is evil, but
aren't so many politicians in Illinois corrupt? It's like, we talk about this all the time with Madigan. It's like, yeah, we know Madigan was corrupt, but it's like he's like the 6th person this week who got indicted for bribery or corruption. So it's like,
yeah, I mean, Illinois voters are immune to this at this point. I mean, it's why we say Illinois voters don't really care how you get things done as long as you get things done. It's been in this culture for a pretty dang long time. And so, yeah, we are just sort of desensitized to this. The hope for Republicans is that the voters aren't fully desensitized, because Republicans are putting a lot of hope, and they have been for a good year plus now, in this Madigan trial. They think that's going to be their big hope. It's why they keep saying, yet again, a select group of Republican consultants want to do Madigan in this next election, because they think that trial is going to be in the press, that Madigan is going to get indicted, and that voters are going to just sweep Republicans into office once Madigan gets indicted. But that strategy just hasn't worked in the past. I mean, it worked one time in one Supreme Court race. The other 100+ times it's been used, it didn't work. And yet here we are. These same consultants want us to use this strategy yet again.
And then we won that Supreme Court race. They redrew the maps, and now what happens?
Well, because Colin, they think it's an issue that like polls well. Like, yes, voters, care about corruption, but how persuadable of an issue is it? And I mean, like, let's be honest, if Madigan gets indicted and he goes to trial, in the minds of voters, the issue's probably solved. All right, we've rooted out the corruption, the justice system has done its job. It's not going to be an issue that's going to win us races in 2024, and instead we should definitely be talking about the cost of living, crime, the economy, jobs. Like, those are issues that like relate to voters day to day. We should not be wasting millions of dollars going on this Madigan angle. Like you said, has really never worked.
And what happened?
I mean, the same people who ran that strategy are now getting hired to run the big races in Illinois yet again. So I bet you that's what we see in 24. It's going to be Madigan everywhere.
And what happens? There's certainly a possibility, guys. What happens if they say not guilty?
Yeah.
Well, John,
You're not biased at all, Chris. So
No, I'm dead serious.
No,
Oliver.
he's not wrong. I mean, this is not a slam dunk case on Madigan by any means. Even after the previous trial I believe, kind of shockingly poor for the defendants. I think everyone's assuming that that Madigan's going down, but this just, even before that, didn't seem like a slam dunk case against Madigan. Do I think the guy's corrupt? Yeah, but do they have enough evidence to prove it? They always say it's not what's the truth, it's what you can prove in court. And do they have the proof? I don't know that we've seen that so far.
I think the big question now is, we see all these current former state representative, state senator testifying in these cases. Who knows if they're testifying in other cases? I think Moody was on the stand in the ComEd 4 trial. So, there's a lot of people turning witness in these cases, which certainly is, if you want Madigan and Burke and all these guys to go to jail, that's a good sign for you that you have many people turning to the witness stand in these cases. But even if you look at some of the legal proceedings here and the indictments, these are still going to be hills to climb. These are not slam dunks. And I don't think you should, even from a political perspective, you shouldn't be putting all of your eggs into the basket of Madigan before you hear, to do this, you would have to hear guilty, 15 years in jail, no chance of parole. That's what you would need to hear to even attempt to make this a campaign issue. I don't see that happen.
Well, even if it does, but here's the problem, Chris, even if it does happen, you have to connect the dots for the voters. When you just say, hey, Madigan's guilty, great. But then the Democrats say, yeah, that's why we didn't vote for the guy. We voted him out. Where's the connection then to the voters to say, hey, you should vote against Melinda Bush because Madigan was corrupt, or you should vote. I know she's not there, but you know what I'm saying? You should vote against Michelle Mussman because Madigan's not there. You should vote against so-and-so. Voters don't connect those dots. Michael, you were going to say something similar.
Yeah, kind of on that same track. I was going to say, obviously the turnover rate in Springfield has been pretty high of late. So you've got a lot of those folks that were directly connected to him are no longer there. And then you have that last speakership vote where multiple, incumbent Democrat state reps ran against them, voted for, other people to be speaker other than him. That was very much a lot of people have been on the record, I would say. Yep. So it makes it tough. Jay Hoffman, for example, had direct ties to Madigan, but he ran against him for speaker, got 12 votes. It's are we really going to be able to use that? Probably not.
Yeah. Some of these, for example, Nabila Syed, she's definitely on the target list. She was elected in 2022. Madigan wasn't even in office. How do you tie a state representative who wasn't even in office with Madigan to Madigan when you can look at a really bad voting history and go after that? We really need to be focused on, the issues that matter to these districts, not just some random thing we think is going to work.
Hey, well, and the issue has been so oversaturated, just as Chris and Abby were saying, of they hear corruption from the Republicans thinking that it works. But talking with so many voters, what's one of the most common things a candidate will hear at the door is, oh, you're all corrupt. Oh, you're all politicians. I hate all of you. They just assume that everyone's corrupt. Not everyone, and some still do care, but it's called the Windy City for a reason. Illinois is known for being one of the most corrupt states for a reason. People would just rather have their corrupt guy who agrees with them on the issues than the other corrupt guy.
And so one of the questions I was asked earlier, how they're going to try and tie this to people, they tried tying Jeannie Ives to Mike Madigan in 2018's primary. Nobody is safe. After this meeting, we will all be tied to Madigan from some tertiary source of information. We will be Mike Madigan's favorite podcast by the end of the.
No.
Chris wishes. He's like, please let it happen.
The
That's what
question is,
Chris
does
wants.
Mike Madigan even know how to listen to a podcast?
I don't even know if he has a computer to watch this podcast.
He
I've
doesn't.
got you guys all beat. We had a campaign piece the last election style tying our local like county board candidates to Mike Madigan and his corruption, and somehow that's why we're gonna flip our county to red. So if you want to try and logic that one to me, like, be my guest. So I think I have everyone beat on obscure Madigan connections on campaign.
Yeah.
Here.
They have these people have one tool in their tool belt, but they're buddies with some of the people who run the Democrat blogs, and they get lots of favorable press from their buddies, and they get lots of high clients because of it. And then they go lose, and you wonder why they're the Democrats' favorite consultants, because they just keep losing. So here we go. All right, we're trying to keep this one a little bit shorter. I know the last couple have dragged on a bit, so we've got a few topics to cover. I'm going to get to just a couple of these. Let's do these fast. But Michael, I know you wanted to talk about Justice Overstreet and him taking on a new role here.
Yeah, this is like 1 minute or less. So the Illinois Judges Association had their annual meeting last week, and they have 1,250 members throughout the state. They're all either current judges or retired judges. They elected Overstreet to be the president for this next term, which is a big deal because that association provides like guidance and continuing education for their members. So having Overstreet in that role is a big deal because he is honestly, he's a strong conservative justice, really good on all the issues, and probably one of the best people you'll ever meet. Overstreet's
a star. So, I mean, this is yet another step up for Overstreet, and certainly a name that people should be paying attention to, because David Overstreet's definitely one of the few stars we have right of center in the state.
Maybe we'll get him on the United States Supreme Court. That's the goal, at least.
Who knows what the future holds for him, but I mean, he's a name that is well known and respected, even outside of his district, but that entire region, everybody knows Overstreet, and that's the mark of gold. If he's endorsed you in your campaign for judiciary, that puts you ahead just immediately.
100%.
All right, and I know you, Matt, wanted to talk briefly about Tracy, Katz, Muhl, if I'm saying it right. Muhl is challenging State Rep Jonathan Carroll. You want to give us a quick update on that, on a Democratic primary that's forming in your region?
Yeah, so Jonathan Carroll, he's been in office now since 2017. And recently he was under some fire he fired a staffer, and then she came out and said that it was allegedly because she failed to get an abortion. Now, the investigation came back saying that that wasn't the case and he wasn't guilty, but the alleged victim was still touting that same thing. So who knows if that's related to this new woman who decided to jump in. Tracy Katz Muhl, I don't know how to say her last name, but she comes out and it looks like she's going to be running to the left of him. She's
got a lot of impressive endorsements too.
Yes, she's with Moms Demand Action. She's on some pro-choice board and a bunch of different liberal groups, and she comes out of the gate, seems pretty strong, but endorsed by like Schneider and Schakowsky and Mayor Rodering. So we'll see how this plays out, but that'll be an interesting battle. Both candidates have their flaws, and we'll see what happens.
I mean, here's the thing, Carroll, we always talk about how, people primarying Republicans and it drives us crazy. Carroll is not a moderate by any stretch of the imagination. He's pretty progressive, and yet here they are challenging him because he's not progressive enough. I mean, the situation with his staffer is still going through some legal processes, so let's see if that is real or not real. We'll find out. But it just looks like this is an excuse to take him out. Not that it has anything to do with what happened there. This is, let's take out a lefty with an even further lefty. And they're coming out all guns blazing here. This is going to be a bloody, bloody primary. So certainly something worth watching. All right, let's go over to Oliver. I know you want to talk about a judge there in DuPage County. Give us an update on what's going on there briefly.
Yep. So just a little background. So every 4 years, associate judges, they have the ability to be retained. So it means circuit court judges, which are just above them in line, they get to vote on whether these associate judges, they can continue on being judges. So in DuPage County, it's historically just been a rubber stamp. They look at everyone and they're like, okay, great.
It's not
So
just DuPage. I mean, pretty much everywhere it's a rubber stamp.
Yeah. So like this is unprecedented in DuPage County. It's never happened. So Jennifer Martyn, she's backed by former county board member Don Pachalski, a lot of labor folks. She hasn't even been there a year. And it sounds like some of the Democrat judges led the charge not to retain her. So it'll be interesting to see the fallout. And there's a lot of changes going on in the DuPage judiciary that we don't really have time to get into, but it's just, I think, a sign of the changing times in DuPage, and it'll be interesting to see how that all works out. She's actually in one of the subcircuits, newly created subcircuits, that's in DuPage. So that's going to create a crowded primary, I think, for Republicans. So
People need to be paying
fallout.
attention to the judiciary. I mean, you've got in DuPage County, you have new subcircuits. So there's going to be 3 openings there in DuPage County, right?
Yep. Yes.
And then the appellate district there is open, and there's multiple seats available on the appellate court, which that goes from, it's got DuPage and Will, and it goes west from there. It's got, I'm guessing 12 counties. I don't remember the exact number of counties.
Feels like
So there's a number there, a number of openings there. I mean, there's a lot happening. You've got a Supreme Court battle in the Democratic primary in one district. You've got a Republican up in another district that Republicans are trying to hold on to. Not enough of these Republican organizations and people who pay attention to politics actually follow the judiciary, but there's a lot that's going to be happening in 2023 and especially 2024 in the Illinois judiciary. So people need to be paying attention. We'll be doing our best to keep you informed of what's going to be happening in these different districts, these different races, because it has a huge impact in politics. And as we talked about, I think 2 weeks ago, maybe a little bit last week, it's one of the few places that Republicans and conservatives still have a little bit of a say in Illinois politics is in the judiciary. And so it's something that needs to be protected and expanded if we're going to have any sort of a voice in Illinois politics.
Absolutely. And we're on the verge of losing that in DuPage. So hopefully we can figure something out.
Yeah, I mean, we lost our majority in Will County this last election. I mean, we're losing ground in the judiciary, and that's a problem.
Exactly.
All right. Once again, poor Chris. What's the late night host who would always not let some, like, was it Matt Damon, where he would just Jimmy Kimmel, I think it was, or just never let him on the show? But like, once again, we ran out of time for Matt Damon. So Chris Jacobiak is our Matt Damon, where once again, Chris wants to talk about Chicago, and we've run out of time. Sorry, buddy.
All right, we'll just save it for next week. So I'll take up half the show with everything that goes on in Chicago on a weekly basis. That Collin.
I mean, at this point, we just keep having more and more stuff to talk about. We might have to have a second podcast where just Chris riffs on Chicago. Maybe we get a little moody music on there. Chris could wear like some late night attire. Maybe a little silk
bathrobe, the pipe going on, a little pipe action going.
Chris Hefner.
Have the smooth jazz going in the background. Chicago after
with his chest hair hanging out. Yeah.
Oh God.
Hey, listen, he doesn't have it on the top anymore, so he needs to flaunt it somewhere.
Oh God.
I keep it.
You should get the big chain too, Chris.
I got the big chain.
I can't even see it. That's not big.
You don't
I'm
even
worried
got
if you think that's big.
He's talking about like the Flavor Flav clock. Like, get one of those huge chains.
That's they're too young for that.
I know. I'm reminded how old I am with how young our team is. All right, let's do this. Final thoughts from anybody. Anybody miss anything? Anyone want to drop any pearls of wisdom before we close this up? I'm seeing some head shakes and no nods. Chris, you want to talk about how the White Sox are finally playing real baseball?
We are so back. They're playing right now. Does anybody have the score on them?
Yeah, but this is being recorded on Thursday, released on Friday, so we can't talk about what's happening on Thursday on a Friday podcast, buddy.
Well, then record. I don't know. Record it live on Friday. Then I don't make the rules. I don't know who's winning the Sox.
Somebody mute Chris. He's done. He's banned for at least a week. All right, everyone, that's been our episode of the Smoke-Filled Room. Thank you for joining us. Thanks especially to our team. So glad to have them all back from vacation. We've got a lot, as I mentioned. We had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 topics we didn't get to. We're trying to respect your time. So we've got plenty we're going to cover next week. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to this channel. We're on video on YouTube. We're on audio on Spotify. We've got plenty to talk about. We want to keep you informed. Political season, petition season starts in September. We're just 3 months away from political season starting in Illinois. So pay attention now, be informed now so you know what the heck's going on. And you do that by subscribing to the Smoke-Filled Room on the Long 9 Studio channel. Thanks everybody for joining us again.